The first pasuk in Noach, Elo Toldos Noach. The word Toldos can either be referring to his children, or Toldos means his personal chronicles, speaking about him personally. If the word Toldos means his chronicles, we have no difficulty. We speak about who was he as a person. El Toldos Noach, Noach ish tzaddik. Who was he? He was a person who was a tzaddik. Tomim hoy b'dorosov. And he was perfect in his generations. Ez Elokim Yisalech Noach. And with God, Noach walked, which we'll discuss. In this one pasuk, the Midrash points out that the word Noach is mentioned 3 times. Elo Toldos Noach. It could have said El Toldos Noach, but who is tzaddik? But it mentions the word Noach a second time, referring to him by name. And then it concludes, Es Elokim Yisalech Noach. Noach is mentioned the 3rd time. It could have said, V'hu Hisalech im Elokim. But yet the Torah goes out of its way to mention him by name 3 times. Why? So the Midrash answer says something phenomenal. That Noach lived in 3 eras. He lived pre-flood. He lived in the era during the flood where everything was contained within the ark, within the teva. And he lived after the great flood, when the previous world no longer existed, and he comes out of the ark, he and his family, and what's contained in the ark is the only thing that exists. The world has been restored physically, but in terms of life, the only life that comes into existence now is what emerges from the teva. Therefore, the Torah tells us Noach pre, Noach during, and Noach post. That's the Midrash. Therefore, the Torah goes out of its way to mention Noach 3 times. So that's the very simple question. If you read the narrative, which we're reading this week, he existed pre-flood. As the Torah tells us, he was given the responsibility to build the ark, the teva, which was a 120-year project, to engage with humanity, to convince them to change their ways. Otherwise, the world's going to be destroyed. Then when they did not, he gathered all the food and all the animals, 2 of the non-kosher species, every living species, not only animals, reptiles, birds, insects, whatever was of life. 7 of the kosher species all went into the teva, into the ark with his family. And then they emerge. So by referring to by Noach, what does that add to the narrative? Somehow, how does this clarify? How does this give us a greater understanding of the narrative? Even if he would have been referred to by and he, rather than Noach mentioned 3 times, we'd understand the same reality. This individual lived in 3 eras: pre-flood, during the flood, and post-flood. So what exactly is the Medrash explaining? So what I had once said, that let's say you have 2 individuals, and their name is Noach, and each one, his life is a different life than the other. One is a physicist, one is a great Torah sage. 2, because they have the same name, are they the same person or different people? And one person is a farmer, Noach. Well, they all have the same name, therefore they're the same person. And each one is involved in a different vocation. Is that what it's about? They're 3 different people. What the Torah is telling us, Noach pre-flood, in terms of his function, in terms of his objective, in terms of his value, had one value. He was fully invested in saving the world. During the Great Flood, what did he become? He became a zookeeper. The Gemara tells us, and it's alluded to in the Pasuk soon, that Noach, because he was late feeding the lion mauled him, and he became disqualified to bring a korban because he became an invalid. He worked day and night for a year, making sure that every species was actually had its sustenance, to the point where he was so overwhelmed with work, and so fatigued, and so depleted, eventually he started to spit blood to that degree. And then he lived post-flood. What was post-flood? The world had a different objective. Mankind was permitted to eat meat. It was a different world. People did not live these exceptionally long years. The world took on a whole different connotation. Each one of these eras, it's as if we're dealing with 3 different people. It's not the same person lived in 3 years. That's what the narrative tells us. By telling us Noach, mentioning 3 times, it's as if we're dealing with 3 different people. Noach, pre-flood, was one person. During the flood, he was another person. Post-flood, he was able to transition into a function which one function had no relevance to the previous, as if we're dealing with 3 different people. So it tells us the greatness of Noach, that he was able to assume different levels of responsibility as if we're dealing with 3 different people. That's why the Torah mentions Noah 3 times. I said, where do we find something comparable to this in recent times? Pre-World War II, he was a great Torah sage. He was 21 years old. His name was Rav Aaron Kotler, Zecher Tzadik Levrocha. Rav Aaron Kotler, at the age of 21, was a Rosh Yeshiva in a small town in Poland called Kletsk. That was the name of the town. The students who he had taught were older than he was. That was the level of genius he was. And he was occupied and fully invested in Torah 24 hours a day, nothing other than that. World War II breaks out, and he escapes to the United States, goes to Kobe, Japan, with his family. He has a visa, and he's able to come to the United States. The rest of his students went from Kobe to Shanghai. When he came to the United States, he assumed the Varat Solam. He was engaged 24 hours a day in raising money and petitioning the government, the United States government, to save Jews, visas, affidavits, whatever was needed. That's what he's involved. Here the man is involved only in Torah, disseminating Torah at the most advanced level, and now he's involved in petitioning, in politicking with the government, convincing them to save Jews. And he saved thousands and thousands of Jews together with Irving Bunim. And there was some other people involved in this effort. Post-World War II, he went and restructured Torah in America. He brought it to another level. He founded many things in Israel, many educational systems, with till today. If not for them, the children of the survivors or the survivors themselves, they would have gone to become totally secularized. And he provided a level of education to them, an educational system, that they were able to be educated more than the government systems, which was called Mamlachti Dati, was called Chinuch Hatzmoi. He's the one who founded this. Literally, on a global level, he was not only disseminating Torah, he was structuring the infrastructure of Jewish communities to be able to guarantee the survival of Torah Judaism. When Rav Aaron Kotler came to the United States, the standard of Torah, even though there were great Talmidei Chachamim in the United States, but to move the masses and to set standards, to raise the bar, he wasn't able to. They weren't able to. He raised the bar. Not only through establishing his yeshiva in Lakewood, but when he came, the average shul in the United States, Orthodox synagogue, if it did not have a gallery, a women's gallery, that had a mechitza, which was not on par, did not meet an appropriate standard. The average synagogue, Orthodox synagogue in the United States, outside of New York, including New York City, had a microphone. They had a microphone. When he came, he changed that whole equation. The mechitzas in Orthodox synagogues were raised. The microphones were taken out. Because he said, to be able to build Torah Judaism and to guarantee the survival, we have to raise the standard. We can't rely on leniencies, that this is okay and that's okay. So we find this person, pre-World War II, he was one Rabbi Cutler. During World War II, he was another person, functioned, spoke differently in terms of his investment of life. And post-World War II, he was another person. That would be the closest comparison to what we're dealing with Noach being mentioned 3 times. The Mishnah tells us in Pirkei Avos that 10 generations from Adam to Noach. And the people, and what is the Torah telling us? What is the Mishnah revealing to us? How patient God was. That although they they enraged God, all these people at the most extreme level, they were defiant and sinful, God did not destroy them. And then Noah comes, after 10 generations, he destroys the world. And then the 10 generations from Noah to Avram. And Avram, and the same people, same behavior, repeated behavior. And it concludes, Avram Avinu kibul schar keneged kulam. Avram received reward, the equivalent reward that those 10 generations were meant to receive themselves. So Rabbeinu Yonah explains over there that God only underwrites existence, and wills existence, if it has a certain degree of minimal value. If it doesn't meet the minimal standard of value, God will cease willing existence. The world reverts back to pre-existence. Noach was not able to pick up the slack to achieve what those generations were supposed to achieve. Therefore, he destroyed the world. Avram, being a different dimension of tzaddik, he was able to compensate for what the world was lacking. And because he was able to bring about that level of perfection in the spiritual realm, that's why God did not destroy the world. And that's the meaning of the Mishnah, Kibul schar keneged kulam. Avram received rewards versus all those 10 generations, and he was able to make the corrections that were needed or provide what was needed in the spiritual realm. That's why the world was not destroyed. But Noah, as great as he was, factually, the world was destroyed, which he failed.
So
Wait. We're on record mode. I'll take it off in a moment. Now, firstly, Moshe Rabbeinu himself was born special. He was so special when he was born that when the Torah tells us his parents, they remarried Amram and Yocheved, it doesn't even identify them by name. It says, Vayelech Ishmi Beis Levi, and he married Bas Levi. So the Maral of Prague asks, factually, we know, which Torah later reveals, that the man who came from Levi, from the house of Levi, was Amram, and the Bas Levi was Yocheved. Why initially doesn't the Torah tell us that Vayelech Amram, V'yikachas Yocheved? Why they refer to this anonymously, Ishmi Beis Levi, who took Bas Levi? That's the question the Maral of Prague asks. So Maral answers that always a child that's born to a couple, they merit to have that special child, if he is special, due to their own special status. So what the Torah is telling us, Moshe's dimension of spirituality was unrelated to his parents. It's not because they created a certain level within themselves, therefore they merited to have that special soul. This was like a continuum of who they were. Moshe Rabbeinu was a different dimension of being. As the Torah tells us, when he was born, the house was filled with light. The Shekhinah was with him immediately. The day he was born, he was able to speak. He was beyond the miracle child. He had to be born into existence because ultimately he had to be the Goel. He had to be the Redeemer of Israel from Egypt. Two individuals had to bring him into existence, but it had nothing to do with who they were in terms of their characteristics within the spiritual realm. He was a different dimension, unrelated to anyone was. Therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu merited a level of relation with God, which no one else merited for that reason. Because he was that special soul that originally was created, that had to be brought into existence for that objective to ultimately bring about, to be the one to receive the Torah. Of course, it had relevance to free choice. Along the way, he had to make choices, but his potential was a level that no one ever had a potential as Moshe Rabbeinu had a potential. And Noach, we'll see in a moment, the Torah identifies him as he was tzaddik v'doroso. He was a tzaddik in his generations. And the two interpretations based on the Gemara is it pointing out a negative or is pointing out something positive? But in reality, whatever it's pointing out, he was not comparable to Avraham Avinu. Whether he should be extolled and praised because despite the environment, he was what he was. But in reality, he could not hold up a candle to Avraham Avinu. Or even if you're pointing out something which is critical of him, relatively speaking, he was. But still, in either way, whether it's positive or negative, he was not Avraham Avinu. So Noach, based on whatever his choices were, whatever he was far less than Avraham Avinu. That's what the Torah is pointing out, B'doroso.
So